When I stepped off that Greyhound into the baking Texas sun, the first thing I noticed was how quiet the ranch had become. Not peaceful quiet, eerie quiet. The kind that settles in when something's gone wrong and no one's talking about it. Dad had been in a coma for 6 days. It was a head injury. A fall, according to Blake. Just one of those things he'd said over the phone, voice breezy as if our father hadn't split his skull open in the cattle pen. But when I arrived, the tension in the air told me there was more to the story. I was raised on this land. The red clay, the stubborn mesquites, the humming of cicadas at dusk, it was all stitched into me. My father, Henry Callahan, had built this ranch from dirt and grit. And Blake, my older brother, always strutted like he'd be the one to inherit it. Because he was older. Because he said so. But Dad never said that. He was deliberate, my father. Not a man of many words, but when he spoke, you listened. And not once did he ever say Blake would be the one in charge. That was just a narrative my brother ran with, the same way he'd smooth-talked his way out of responsibility since high school. So when I showed up and saw that our ranch foreman had packed up and left, I started paying closer attention. The barn was half-emptied. 2 workers I'd known since childhood were gone without a word. A strange black SUV rolled slowly past the front gate one morning, pausing just a second too long. And then I overheard Dolores, the cook, on the phone saying, "No, he's serious about selling." Selling? I didn't panic. I'd learned a long time ago that panic doesn't help. I asked questions instead. Blake brushed them off. "Just rumors," he said, flipping a burger on the back porch like we were still kids on a summer night. "We need money for Dad's care. Might sell off the north pasture." The north pasture? That was 1/3 of the entire ranch. "Dad would never agree to that," I said, keeping my voice level. Blake just grinned. "Well, he's not in much of a position to object, is he?" That was when I knew. Something was deeply wrong. I found the paperwork in the study on a Wednesday morning. Blake had left for town, said he had meetings, which meant flirting with the bank manager's daughter over coffee and pretending he knew a damn thing about finance. I took the chance to dig. Dad's study still smelled like pipe tobacco and old leather. His filing cabinet, dusty but organized, was always his fortress. But tucked into a newer, thinner folder labeled pending contracts, I found something that stopped me cold. A property transfer agreement. The buyer was some LLC out of Houston. And at the bottom of the last page, there it was. My father's signature. Scrawled clean and smooth, dated just 4 days ago. 4 days ago. Dad was unconscious in a hospital bed, tubes in his arms and a machine breathing for him. There was no way in hell he signed that paper. I stood there, just staring at it. I felt the heat rise behind my eyes, not from shock, but from the unmistakable weight of betrayal. Blake had forged our father's signature. He wasn't selling just the north pasture. He was selling everything. That night, I confronted him. We were in the kitchen, the only light coming from the overhead fixture humming above the island. I tossed the contract on the counter. "What is this?" Blake didn't even flinch. Just poured himself a drink, something expensive and dark. "Exactly what it looks like. Dad didn't sign this. He's old. He made arrangements before the accident. It's dated 4 days after the accident." A pause. His jaw tensed. Then he shrugged. "Must have been a typo." That was Blake. Life first, figure out the details later. He was the kind of man who could set your house on fire and try to sell you the ashes. "I'm going to the sheriff," I said quietly. He laughed. "And say what? That your big brother's trying to handle family business while you're what? Playing detective? Don't be dramatic, Kathleen. You always did have a flair for the theatrical." He stepped closer, and for the first time in years, I saw what he really was. Not just a manipulator. Not just entitled. He was dangerous. So I didn't go to the sheriff. Not yet. I went to Carol Whitmore. She's been practicing law in our town for 30 years. Knows every probate judge, every notary, every trick in the book. And more importantly, she knew my father. I slid the contract across her desk and waited. Her eyes scanned it slowly. Then she looked up at me and said, "This is fraud." That's when the plan began. Carol was quiet for a moment, just staring at that forged signature like it personally offended her. "This is not Henry's handwriting," she said finally, pulling out a magnifying glass like something out of a courtroom drama. "Too smooth. Too modern. Your daddy writes like he's still in 1964. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I asked the question I'd been dreading, "What can we do?" "Well," she said, tapping a red nail on the desk, "we gather proof. Solid proof. You can't just accuse your brother of fraud without giving the law something to chew on." That's when we started building the trap. First, I set up a fake buyer. Carol had a friend in Houston, a semi-retired lawyer named Mike who owed her a favor. He's a decent actor, she said with a wink. Once played Scrooge in community theater. Had the audience sobbing. I met Mike that weekend and we worked out the script. He'd pose as a wealthy investor interested in quiet ranch acquisitions. No banks, no lawyers, just cash and signatures. Next, we needed a setting. I picked the old machinery shed out near the back acreage. Blake had started showing buyers around their already low-traffic, private, no-nosy neighbors. Perfect for hidden cameras. I borrowed equipment from the local college. A friend who teaches digital media owed me a favor after I babysat her triplets during flu season. We wired the shed up good. High angles, clean sound, and one tiny mic clipped inside the contract folder Mike would carry. Then I waited. It took exactly 5 days. Blake came to me in the living room, sunglasses still on though it was nearly sunset. Got a guy, he said, like he was offering me a golden opportunity. Wants the whole place. Top dollar. Does Dad know? I asked, keeping my voice even. Blake gave me that smirk again, the one he wore at our father's 60th when he took credit for a barbecue he never touched. Don't worry about it. I've got the paperwork covered. I want to meet him. That threw him off. Just a flicker. Then he adjusted. Fine. Be at the shed Tuesday morning. Early. I nodded. I'll bring coffee. And just like that it was set. Tuesday would be the showdown. Tuesday dawned hot and dusty, the kind of morning where even the flies seemed sluggish from heat. I woke before sunrise and stood at the kitchen sink, watching the sky bleed orange behind the barn. Blake was already out at the shed, probably pacing and rehearsing his lines. I packed the coffee thermos and 2 cups into my truck, hands steady, heart pounding like a drum in my throat. Carol had insisted on witnesses, people with no stake in the land but enough authority to hold water in court. She brought 2, Mike's brother, a notary public, and a local real estate agent who moonlit as a legal witness. Both would stay hidden until the moment was right. As I drove toward the shed, the silence in the fields pressed down on me. I thought about Dad, still lying in that hospital bed, unaware that his own son was trying to sell the land out from under him. I thought about my mother, gone 10 years now, and how she used to say Blake was born with a silver tongue and a rusted-out moral compass. I pulled up to the shed at 8:15. Blake was leaning against the door, shades on, hair slicked back like he just walked out of a car commercial. Where's your friend? I asked, handing him a coffee. He'll be here. Blake took a sip, then scowled. You always make it too sweet. I shrugged. Just like Mama used to. 10 minutes later, Mike arrived in a black rental car, playing his role to perfection. Smooth handshake, fake Texas drawl, tailored blazer too nice for the heat. Always wanted to own a slice of real American dirt, he said with a grin. Blake lapped it up. They went inside, spread the papers out on a hay-covered workbench, and Mike started his spiel. I need everything clear, he said, tapping the contract. Don't want this coming back to bite me. Blake chuckled. My dad's already signed power of attorney. You're covered. That's so. Mike flipped to the back page. Looks like he just signed this last week. Blake didn't even blink. Yep. Still sharp, my old man. Right then I stepped forward. Out from the shadows, with the real witnesses behind me and a recorder in hand. That's funny, I said, my voice calm but sharp as barbed wire. Because Dad's been in a coma for 10 days. Blake froze. Mike backed away, revealing his wire. The witnesses stepped forward, all business now. The notary pulled out a stamp. Mr. Callahan, he said to Blake, you just admitted to forging a legal signature and attempting to sell property under false authority. This has been recorded and witnessed. The silence was thunderous. Blake looked at me. No smirk now. Just a pale, shaking man who realized for once he wasn't the smartest person in the room. I stared back. Steady. You tried to steal from Dad, I said. From us. But you forgot who taught me how to fight dirty if I had to. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I turned and walked out. Behind me, the sound of a camera clicking echoed through the dust. I didn't sleep much that night. After the sting operation, Carol drove the footage straight to the county courthouse. The notary submitted a sworn affidavit. The real estate witness gave a statement too. Blake's forged signature. His smug little confession. It was all sealed in official ink. I sat on the porch that night, rocking gently in Dad's chair, sipping sweet tea that tasted more like adrenaline. The cicadas screamed in the trees. My hands still trembled. The next morning Blake was gone. No note. No truck in the driveway. Just a drawer left open in the hall table. Some of Dad's old records missing, and the faint smell of his cologne lingering like a bad memory. Carol called me before breakfast. "Warrant's coming," she said. "They're treating it as felony fraud. He'll have to come back eventually. What if he doesn't?" "Oh, honey," she said. "He will. Men like him can't stay away from a stage, especially when they think they can still win." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. After we hung up, I drove into town. I needed something normal: groceries, gas, small talk. Anything to remind me I wasn't losing my mind. But at the feed store, people stared. Not unkindly, just knowingly. Dolores must have talked. Or maybe the sheriff. Word spreads fast when there's scandal involved. Mr. Chalmers, the old man who'd sold Dad his first tractor, gave me a slow nod. "Your mom'd be proud, Kathleen." That caught me off guard. I barely got out a thank you before bolting to my truck. I spent the afternoon going through Dad's office. Every file. Every document. I wanted to make sure there weren't any other time bombs waiting to go off. That's when I found the letter. Unopened, postmarked 2 weeks before the accident. It was addressed to me in Dad's shaky script. Inside, a single sheet of lined paper. "Kat, if Blake's been snooping around the books, be careful. He's been asking too many questions about the deed, and I don't trust the way he's been smiling lately. I've put everything in the blue safe under my bed. You'll know what to do. Love you always, Dad." I sat on the floor, clutching that paper like it was a lifeline. All the calm I'd been clinging to cracked in an instant. He knew. He knew Blake would try something, and he trusted me to handle it. And I almost didn't. I almost gave up. Just last week, sitting in that empty study, I doubted myself. Thought maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was just a little sister clinging to old grudges. But I wasn't. I'd been right all along. And now I had more than revenge. I had Dad's faith. The hearing was set for the following Friday. Probate court, small town, no jury. Just a judge named Halby who smelled faintly of peanut brittle and kept a clock that ticked louder than his voice. Blake had finally resurfaced, naturally through his lawyer. Some hotshot from Dallas who wore pinstripes in July and called me Miss Callahan like I was a witness, not the one Blake had tried to rob blind. I showed up in my boots and best denim skirt. Not because I was trying to make a point, though maybe I was, but because this was our land and I didn't want to pretend I was anything else. Carol was with me, a force of quiet fury in her pearl-buttoned blouse. "Don't speak unless spoken to," she whispered. "Let Blake dig his own grave." And dig he did. He took the stand with that same damn grin he wore when we were kids and he'd broken Mom's vase, blaming it on the wind. "My father and I discussed selling the ranch," he said, smooth as honey. It was his wish to downsize, prepare for retirement. And this signature? Judge Halby held up the forged document. "It was made with his full consent?" "Yes, sir," Blake said deadpan. "I had power of attorney." "Signed when?" Blake hesitated. I held my breath. A week before the accident." Carol stood. "Your Honor, the hospital records and sworn affidavits from medical staff confirmed that Mr. Henry Callahan was unconscious and in intensive care during the date listed on this document." She handed over the proof. Blake's lawyer tried to pivot, throwing out legalese like spaghetti at a wall. But it was too late. The judge raised a bushy brow and stared at Blake for a full 10 seconds. "I may be old," he said finally, "but I've seen better lies from a poker dog painting." I almost laughed. Almost. Judge Halby turned to me. "Miss Callahan, do you wish to contest your brother's petition to sell the property?" "I do," I said. "With everything I've got." And then I handed over the final nail in the coffin. A video file, burned onto a flash drive. The sting footage. Blake, caught in 1080p, grinning as he confirmed the forgery, ink still fresh. The judge watched in silence, hands folded. When it ended, he looked at Blake again. "You'll be hearing from the DA's office. This court voids the contract, revokes your claim to the power of attorney, and appoints Kathleen Callahan as the interim conservator of her father's estate." Carol patted my arm. Blake didn't look at me as he left the courtroom, just stormed out, a broken man in borrowed arrogance. Outside, the summer heat hit me like a wave. I didn't smile. Not yet. Because Dad still hadn't woken up. The courthouse victory tasted hollow when I stepped into Dad's hospital room that evening. The beeping was the same. So was the quiet hum of machines keeping him just barely tethered to this world. I sat in the corner, shoes dusty from court, skirt creased, the adrenaline draining out of me like someone had pulled the plug. I took his hand. It was dry, warm, still calloused even after weeks in a hospital bed. I stopped him, Dad, I whispered. Blake tried to sell the ranch. You were right about him. But I got him. I swear I got him. His chest rose and fell. I pressed my forehead to his hand. You were the only one who ever believed I had it in me. And I did it for you. All of it. The next part is hard to explain. I wasn't asleep. I wasn't hallucinating. But something shifted. I felt his fingers twitch. Just a little. Then his breathing changed. Deeper. Sharper. I hit the call button so hard I nearly snapped it off. Nurses rushed in, followed by Dr. Rahman. Tests were run. Flashlights in eyes whispered jargon I couldn't follow. But when they stepped back, he opened his eyes. Not fully, just a sliver of blue peeking through. But I was right there. And he saw me. He blinked. Twice. And then he tried to speak. His mouth didn't work the way it used to, but I leaned close and heard the faintest rasp. Cat. Tears hit my cheeks before I even realized they were coming. I'm here, Daddy, I said, gripping his hand. I'm right here. The next few hours passed in a blur. Stabilization, a barrage of tests, specialists summoned like fireflies to a flame. But I didn't leave his side. That night Carol called. How's he doing? He's awake, I said, voice raw. He knew me. A pause. Then it's over. Not yet, I said. But almost. She exhaled. I'll prep the paperwork. Conservatorship can be upgraded now that he's conscious. As I hung up and looked at Dad, still groggy but unmistakably there, I thought about how close we'd come to losing everything. The ranch. Our name. Our future. All because one brother couldn't stand not being king of the hill. But kings fall. And daughters rise. Dad stayed awake for maybe 5 minutes that first day. 10 the next. But by the end of the week, he was asking for toast and grumbling about the hospital's eggs. That's when we told him. Not the full detail, his blood pressure didn't need that. But enough. Enough for him to know Blake had tried to sell the ranch while he lay unconscious. Enough to see the betrayal settle in his eyes like dust over a grave. Should have known, he muttered. That boy always thought the world owed him more than it gave. He asked for Carol. She came that afternoon, dragging a manila folder and a pen that had ended more than a few bad deals in her time. They spoke in private while I paced the hallway like a restless dog. When she came out, she looked at me with something close to pride. He updated the will. That stopped me. He didn't disown Blake. Not completely, she continued. But your father's no fool. Blake's out of the inheritance unless he agrees to full financial oversight and a psychiatric evaluation. I blinked. Wait. That's in the will. She smirked. Honey, I helped write it. The new version named me as executor. Full control of the ranch. Power to decide how it's run, who gets what, and where every dollar goes. Blake would get a small monthly stipend from a trust, just enough to keep him out of trouble, but never enough to fund another scheme. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. You sure this is what he wants? I asked quietly. Carol looked at me. He's sure. He said it plain as day. Kathleen's the one who stayed honest. That night, I sat by Dad's bed as the sun went down outside his window. You didn't have to do that, I said. He turned his head, eyes still sharp despite the haze of meds. You earned it. I shook my head. You raised us both. No, he said, voice gravel. I tried to raise you both. Only one of you listened. The weight of his words settled in my chest like a stone. For the first time in weeks, I let myself cry. Not out of sadness or rage. Just release. He reached out and took my hand again. Same way he used to when I was little, afraid of the dark. You held the line, he said. And that was all I ever needed to hear. I should have known Blake wouldn't go quietly. It started with a voicemail. Kat, it's me. Look, I messed up. But you don't understand. I had debts. Real ones. People who don't take maybe next month as an answer. You've got the ranch now. Can we talk? I deleted it. 3 days later, he showed up. Right at the edge of the property line, parked outside the cattle gate like some ghost of a past mistake. I found him leaning on the hood of his truck, wearing that same fake humility he used to get out of math tests and bar fights. You shouldn't be here, I said, arms folded. I'm still family. Barely. He flinched but recovered quickly. Look, I get it. I pushed too far. But Dad's okay now, right? So no harm, no foul. My laugh was bitter. You forged his name, Blake. You tried to sell the land he built with his bare hands. I was desperate, he snapped. You think I wanted to do that? Yeah, I said. I think you did. He stepped closer. Just give me a piece of it. Sell off one of the pastures. You don't even need all of it. We split it clean. I go my way, you go yours. I took a deep breath. Looked out over the field behind him. Sun beating down on the hay bales, cicadas droning like a warning. You don't get it, I said softly. This land isn't money to me. It's him. It's every scraped knee, every lesson. Every hour we spent mending fences and hauling feed. You tried to sell our legacy for a quick escape. He didn't speak. So I did. You're not getting anything. Dad left a trust. You'll get your stipend. Use it, don't use it. I don't care. But this ranch? This land? You set fire to your chance at it. He stared at me, eyes narrowing. I'll challenge the will. Go ahead, I said, pulling out my phone. We've got footage, signatures, court rulings, and a whole folder marked intent to commit fraud. You want to dance with the DA again? Silence. Then finally he backed off. Got in his truck. Slammed the door harder than necessary. You always thought you were better than me, he muttered. No, I said. Just better for this place. He drove off in a cloud of dust. And I knew right then that was the last time he'd ever set foot on the ranch again. 3 weeks later, Dad came home. The doctors wanted him in assisted care, but he refused. Said if the land was still standing, he'd damn well sit on it. We set him up in the downstairs room, the one that used to be the den, looking out over the front pasture. I caught him one morning just watching the sunrise through the old pane window, coffee shaking slightly in his hand. Looks like rain, he muttered. I smiled. Hope so. The fields need it. We didn't talk about Blake much after that. Once the new will was certified and the fraud report filed, the sheriff had a long talk with Blake and his lawyer. They cut a deal. No jail time if he agreed to forfeit any claim on the ranch, keep his distance, and live under the thumb of the trust's terms. He took the deal. Of course he did. Blake was a lot of things, but he wasn't dumb. Not when the evidence was airtight. Carol filed the final conservatorship papers on a Tuesday. I stood in the courthouse again, this time not in defense but in confirmation. Judge Halby smiled faintly as he signed off. Looks like the right person's finally in charge. Afterward, I walked the long dirt road back to the ranch. Just me, the wind, and the creak of the gate as I stepped through. The workers started returning. The ones who left when Blake scared them off came back when they heard he was gone for good. Dolores made a peach cobbler that tasted like forgiveness. The cows mooed like nothing had changed, but everything had. Dad let me take over slowly. First payroll, then land leases, then operations. I didn't do it alone and I didn't pretend to know it all. But I did it honestly. One evening I found a photo in Dad's drawer. Mom holding me on her hip, dirt smeared across both our cheeks. Blake's off to the side, scowling. Even then, he hated not being center stage. I slipped the photo into a frame and set it on the mantel. Not to forget, but to remember who we were before things broke. Now the ranch runs under my name. We've stabilized the finances, repaired the east fence line, and started offering boarding again. Dad watches it all, quiet pride behind tired eyes. One evening as we sat on the porch listening to the wind whip through the mesquites, he turned to me and said, "You saved this place." I didn't answer right away. Just watched the sun dip below the pasture, golden light catching on every blade of grass. Just did what had to be done, I said. But inside I knew it was more than that. I didn't just save the ranch. I saved the legacy. And here's what I learned from it all. When someone tries to rewrite your family's story, you don't let them. You pick up the pen. And you write the ending yourself.